What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Grid Live Encore. I'm Ben Schneider alongside Brandon Crossland and Casey Campbell. Brandon, Casey, how are you guys doing? It's been a wild weekend in the world of racing.
Oh, yeah, it's been great. And what's that I hear? Some Michael McDonald? Take it away, Casey.
Taking it to the streets, man.
You know, Michael McDonald's the only singer that has two voices at one time. He can just harmonize with himself.
No, I'm not going to sing. I know.
I really wanted you to sing. That was your cue.
No, I know some people that would not let me live this day. Yes, it was a weekend. Yes, it was, and it's going to be a weekend next week too because Grid Network's going to be at Mid Ohio, so that'll be fun. Well, actually, I'll be at Mid Ohio. So yeah.
Well, Grid Encore at the very least will be at Mid Ohio with you, Casey, and certainly looking forward to your coverage there. And good to see our own Joe Samniego in the chat. What a weekend, absolutely. And we got a lot to recap and discuss as we always do on this show. But first, want to give a shout out as always to our Patreon supporters, Colin, Deshelle, Mark, Robin, and David. Your support means the world to us. It's what allows for things like Casey to go to Mid Ohio. And if we get $500 a month on our Patreon page, we can start doing that on a little more of a regular basis. Or if you'd rather make a one-time donation, you can visit Buy Me a Coffee. Link to that is in the description box below. And follow us on all of our social media platforms. And subscribe to us here on YouTube if you're watching this and you haven't already. We're trying to continue on our goal here, long-term, 1,000 subscribers and beyond. But first, 700, 800, 900, you know how it goes. Doing everything we can to continue to grow this motorsports media outlets. Your support is very much appreciated. In the meantime, we've got to start with the Cup Series. Again, a nice opportunity for us to discuss Cup here on this show with the late start times, which we'll have again this upcoming weekend in Atlanta. But the NASCAR Chicago Street Race, I think, produced, you guys may disagree, maybe you won't, I don't think you will, the biggest upset in the world of motorsports so far this year. Shane van Gisbergen, somebody we never talk about on this show, with where he usually races in supercars, he won the race. He won on debut in the NASCAR Cup Series, only the seventh driver ever to do that, the first since 1963. That was when Johnny Rutherford won a Daytona dual race back when they were points races. So needless to say, it's been a very long time since we've seen anything like this. In his first career start, the three-time Supercars champion and the 2022 Grid Ranking World Champion, he's now batting 1,000 in the NASCAR Cup Series. He's a race winner. Brandon, how impressed were you by Shane van Gisbergen's win on debut in the Cup Series?
Man, I was absolutely blown away. You can't put into words what that was like to see Van Hamburger win the whole thing there in Chicago. Joey Logano poked some fun at the end because no one could catch him. I mean, he's consistently putting up better lap times in the entire field, and NASCAR overtime almost messed him up, but we're glad it didn't. He was able to overcome that and drive away again, and I'm sure he would have been able to do that even if it was double overtime. He would just drive away again. What a show for Shane van Gisbergen. Of course, that name is no stranger to us here on Grid Network. We hear it plenty of times on the other shows. But yeah, you're right, Ben. We don't really hear it much here on the Encore side, but that's probably going to change. That's huge there for the Australian V8 Supercar champion to come in your first start and take the victory. And I'm just blown away that it's happened on the 75th year of the sport and how long it's been since someone's been able to do it successfully. You never hear about things like that. And it would only take someone with a champion talent coming to Project 91 to be able to get that done. And Shane van Gisbergen's your guy.
It was probably one of the most shocking wins I think the last time somebody told me in a chat that I'm in, I think said either McDowell's Daytona 500 or AJ's win at the Indy Road Course. But yeah, it's that was. But if you watched practice, you would know that car was fast. But just the way that event happened, and we'll obviously get more into that as we get along into the show. But again, it doesn't really surprise me. Nothing surprises me in this sport. Well, some things do, but yeah, just what a win yesterday for Shane van Gisbergen, or how many times and how many pronunciations of that last name that we saw throughout being pronounced by several different people. But yeah, it was a handful. That was fun.
Yeah, I think we had a Van Gisbergen. I think Junior was just saying Gisbergen. He gave up on the van part.
Yeah.
I don't know
But-
what happened with Jeff Burton. I actually saw some tweets saying like, I hope Jeff Burton didn't have like a mini stroke or something. Like it was one point where I think he just stumbled over and just gave up, and there was like 6 seconds of dead air before Rick Allen came back in. So the radio style is always interesting when you get those guys on the call for NBC. But just to drive home the point of how unprecedented this is. I mentioned he's the 7th driver to win in his first start. I've got the stats pulled up right here. Jim Roper, 1949 Charlotte Speedway. That was the first ever NASCAR strictly stock at the time race, which we now know is the Cup Series today. So, of course, whoever won that race, Glenn Dunaway thought he was going to win that race and then had it taken away from him through disqualification. But that's the first ever race right there for anybody. So whoever won that race was going to have won in their first start. Jack White did it later in 49 at Hamburg. Then Harold Keitem at Daytona Beach in 1950, Leon Sales in 1950 as well at North Wilkesboro, and Marvin Burke in 1951 at Oakland. So the first 5 to do it came really in NASCAR's infancy in the first 3 seasons. And then, as I mentioned, Johnny Rutherford did it in 1963. That was back when the Daytona dual races were points races. They aren't points races today. So if that happened today, that doesn't count. And Shane van Gisbergen does it yesterday, the first in 60 years, the first in the modern era. So needless to say, I mean, to me, this is far and away the most impressive out of all those. I don't want to take away from any of these drivers who won these races back in the day, but NASCAR has totally changed and totally evolved over the last 75 years. Like you're mentioning, Brandon, it's a completely different sport nowadays. And I said when this was first announced, of course, SVG, like if we're trying to do like a fantasy game where we're picking our top 10, I'm certainly going to consider him, and I wouldn't put a top 5 past him either. But to win a race on debut, I know it's kind of a debut for everybody because we've never done a street race before. But thinking of course there's some overlap between the supercars and particularly the next gen car. I really did not expect a win in his debut, though. I mean, it's just unbelievable. And I saw some people say, this isn't a great look for the sport because all these series regulars got showed up by an outsider coming in. And I get what you're saying. I get that side of the argument. I think Chase Elliott certainly gets that side of the argument with some of his post-race comments. But I think it could be partially that, but it's more so what a talented race car driver Shane van Gisbergen is. That I think is the main takeaway from this. That this guy can hop in. And remember, he races down under. He's sitting on the other side of the car in the supercars. He mentioned that in his post-race press conference. That was a huge adjustment for him, just trying to get used to the angles of the corners and everything. So, he certainly made it look easy, but don't think for one second that it is. To hop into a completely different series on a completely different continent and go out and win in your first race is simply unbelievable.
And also, they really stressed the Ricky Rudd camera angle there with Gisbergen, how he's one of the only drivers that's really using the clutch and actually saying that it gives him an advantage with turning the car and things like that. That's something that none of the other Cup drivers are using because it's not really necessary in this next gen car to be using that clutch pedal. So it was impressive to see that.
Yeah, there's no doubt. The foot cam certainly, I think, put a lot of things into perspective as well. So that was a nice touch from the folks over at NBC. Casey, do you have anything else to add on SVG here?
Yeah, I'm good.
All right. Well, in that case, we will go to the chat here. Let me take the results off and put us on normal full screen. There we go. And let's see. Start with Joe Samaniego here. The fresh tires were key for getting away on the restarts. I thought he was going to get dumped. Well, Brandon, you brought this up as well. We thought he was kind of home free there for the win there in those last 5 laps. And then we had the incident with Bubba Wallace getting into Ricky Stenhouse Jr. That nearly ruined his race. But I'll say this. I was going to save it for a later segment, but kudos to NASCAR for making the call to go to single file restarts. And I honestly hope that they maybe look at this and think maybe we should do this at, I don't know, the IMS road course later in the year. Maybe we should do this, at some other tracks. And I wouldn't personally be opposed to going back to the way it used to be, where we have the lead lap cars lining up single file and lap cars on the inside. And then with 10 to go, it's just one single file train. It seemed to work for decades. I know we've been in the single file or in the double file restart era for a long time now, but I think that played no small role in keeping this from being a complete crapshoot demolition derby in the final laps and allowing us to get a relatively clean finish. So hats off to NASCAR for making that call. Toby Lambeth says, one shining moment. It's so difficult to win in a NASCAR Cup Series, and Shane van Gisbergen did it. We may never see anything like this ever again. Historic performance. Appreciate this. SVG is him, no doubt. And Adam Lemery certainly agrees there. Two-incher, good to see a new face here in the chat. Very proud Kiwi here. Absolutely. I'm sure you guys have to be overjoyed watching SVG be able to do what he did yesterday. Adam says, I didn't expect it either. SVG is incredible. We certainly know Adam is a supercars expert. He's been very familiar with SVG's career down under. And if he's telling you he didn't expect it, that should say something about how massive of a performance it was from SVG. And two-incher adding, maybe using the clutch is the difference between a good driver and a great driver. Well, I'll tell you what, there's going to be a lot of drivers that are series regulars, because I think that, you know, what it sounds like, this is a 3-year deal. I think it went off well enough that I see no reason why we're not going to see at least a similar event going forward again. The ratings were certainly a massive win for NBC. Those just came out within the last hour or so. You know, I think there's going to be a lot of drivers, even just for road course races, that are going to be looking at SVG's footwork and the in-car camera and trying to pick up some pointers from him to improve their own driving whenever we go back to a street race again, whether it's Chicago or otherwise. And Rod Brown saying SVG deserves his shot. Absolutely. Well, let's talk a little bit more about SVG, Casey. You know, we certainly talk about a wide variety of different drivers and different disciplines here on this network. From what you've seen from SVG, you know, what he's done in supercars, obviously hopping into sports cars on a semi-regular basis and trying World Rally Championship within the last year, and now coming to NASCAR Cup and winning on debut. Does he have a case as one of the best race car drivers in the world right now?
Oh, yeah. I mean, just look at what he's done in supercars, and you take it over to NASCAR and go do what he did there. And, you know, NASCAR is a sport that doesn't, you know, that races on now on all different types of things. It's street courses, road courses, on dirt, pavement, asphalt, ovals, short tracks, super speedways, you name it, and NASCAR has raced it. So you can now check the street course thing off the list, and it was a very interesting race, you know, to watch. And, you know, some of the things in there, and yeah, did they have to cancel some stuff? Yes. Did they have to move? Were they put in a box and that's why they had to shorten the race? Yes. But overall, the race got done on the day it was supposed to, and ultimately enough, everyone was happy. Yeah, there were some disappointing fans. Yeah, there was some concerts that got canceled. But overall, this is a major, major win for NASCAR. The TV ratings show it, and just look at all those people that were down there. My good friend and our Grid Network colleague, Jonathan Fiel, was down there this weekend, and he was telling me just about all the people that were down there, and just about the drivers were actually walking with the crowd to get to some things. I think he saw, he was telling me that Parker Retzlaff was walking across the McDonald's bridge trying to get from, the garage area, the media center and all that. And actually the media center was actually the Art Institute of Chicago. So that was pretty cool there. So it was a blast for everyone. I know everyone got soaked at that race with all the rain that they've had. And honestly, I still don't know how they got that done, but NASCAR is going to do everything they can to get the race done on time, and they did again.
Yeah, he is one of the best race car drivers in the world at this point right now. And I agree with a bunch of other people that are saying that we've underestimated supercars for a long time, that myself included. Just when Van Gisbergen was asked about it, he said that I believe he was the one that said any of the top 10 in V8 supercars could come over here and do the same thing I just did. And I'm starting to believe him. I've always known that V8 supercars are really high intensity, best drivers, most of the best drivers in the world, especially in that hard top car discipline. And he's really shown it on his debut. What an incredible win. And yeah, also we'll talk about it soon here, but what an incredible weekend for NASCAR overall.
I can't help but think of that Kevin Harvick tweet that he sent out last year about Marcus Ambrose and saying, if Ambrose had been in a little bit better equipment, no disrespect to Richard Petty Motorsports, but if he had been with, who knows, a Penske or a Gibbs or a Stewart Haas or a Hendrick or whoever, maybe, could have won a race on an oval or two or several. He was saying that Ambrose would still be in the sport today and probably have double-digit wins by now, maybe double digits on road courses alone. I think people have forgotten, maybe they saw that SVG quote and maybe thought he was being a little bit arrogant or presumptuous, but I think Ambrose was all the proof you need with how well he did when he came over here, winning at Watkins Glen. Probably should have won a race at Sonoma if he hadn't shut the car off on the uphill there, which led to Jimmy Johnson's only road course win, ironically enough. But I think he certainly has a case, to be in that conversation. And I saw a tweet as well earlier this morning that said Shane van Gisbergen is everything that dirt racing fans claim Kyle Larson is. And again, I don't want to take away from Kyle Larson because I know he's a Cup champion. I know he's won in several different disciplines as well. But I think if you want a good comparison, you want to make somebody put somebody in that stratosphere, if you will, that we can talk about, somebody that can hop into different cars and go out and literally win on debut. Shane van Gisbergen's your guy. So I would love to see him back here in NASCAR again. I'd love to see him try an oval out. But even if it's just another Project 91 race on a road course, I know Justin Marks said that as of right now, that's the last time we're going to see that car this year. Maybe things will change, maybe they won't. But I think he certainly is going to have some car owners giving him a call. And Kobe brings up a good point here in the chat as well. Is 2024 setting up to be SVG's farewell season in supercars? Interesting post-race comments about one more year in Australia. I don't know. Maybe he could re-up in supercars. Maybe he comes here and gives NASCAR a try. I'm sure even some IndyCar team owners, given what Scott McLaughlin's doing right now, they've got to have him on their radar as well. So I think he's going to have no shortage of options when it comes time for 2025 here. I know he wants to see next year out in supercars, but it's going to be interesting to see what he decides to do.
I'm in a chat with another group of guys, and one of them really wanted to see Scott McLaughlin and SVG at the Indy Road Course on the doubleheader weekend in the same car battling it out together. That'd be pretty cool to see two Kiwis go at it.
Yeah, that should be fun. Speaking of silly season, it's gonna get interesting this as in these next few months. So as I always say on this show, stay tuned.
Yeah, still a lot of pieces to fall into place for next year, of course. And I know Brock was saying this on his stream. Brock Beer of LastCar.info, that is, was saying this on his stream yesterday. The Indy Road Course for sure. I mean, can you imagine Shane van Gisbergen? I guess Scott McLaughlin will be there, right? Because the IndyCar Series will be there as part of that doubleheader weekend again.
Yep, Indy NXT as well.
Yeah, and get Shane van Gisbergen or somebody in that 91 to go up against Kamui Kobayashi, the endurance driver for Toyota, who's going to be in the 67, that third 2311 car. So, it's great to see all this crossover going on in the world of motorsports right now, and certainly. I think if the funding is there, if the schedules align just right, I'm sure everybody would love to see SVG give it another shot here in the Cup Series and see if he can continue his perfect stretch of batting 1,000 and maybe go 2 for 2. Who knows? But a fantastic drive from him this weekend. Now let's talk about the weekend as a whole. Generally speaking, I know there were a lot of people who were on the fence, a lot of naysayers, a lot of people saying, "What are we doing taking NASCAR to a street course?" Brandon, given that we've made it through the weekend against all odds for the weather and everything, were you impressed with the on-track product? And is this something NASCAR should continue to do on an annual basis, going to a street course like this?
Let's put it this way. I'm really glad that NASCAR has a 3-year deal with Chicago, because I feel like it really got even though we had a great race, I feel like it was a super unfair treatment of what this track is probably capable of. And of course, the weekend that NASCAR comes to the streets of Chicago, we get a hiatus of the drought that Chicago is experiencing, and we get a torrential downpour out there at Grant Park. I mean, of course, that's how it works for NASCAR's luck sometimes, I guess. But I think we need to see this place in the sunlight. We need to see it dry, and I think we can get that in 2 more years. And also, one street course annually, I think that's probably where it needs to stay. But but this is where my concern is, because knowing how sometimes NASCAR has acted in the past to success, they want to double down on it and add so many that it's no longer good anymore. So I hope that's not the case. I hope maybe we'll do this deal, and then when the contract is over, we'll either, I guess, add a second street course races, which is probably what they're going to do at a different location. Or we can make this move to, say, Boston or some other major city where you're not reaching a market. Seattle. The possibilities are kind of endless at this point. with governments that are willing.
Street course race in Seattle. Now that would be interesting.
Yes.
But the overall, I think the biggest thing is, now I will say this. Now you're going to have your people that are going to say that, don't like this event because they never liked this event because of, either that this thing is, why are they doing this and why are they going on the streets of Chicago? And then obviously there's all the people that have the perception about, Chicago and its crime records and all that stuff. And that's another discussion for another day. But overall, I think this was a good race. This was a good product. I know it faced a lot of obstacles, and I think it still does. Obviously, a new mayor, with Brandon Johnson coming in there. If you may remember, this was set up by the former mayor of Chicago, Lori Lightfoot. So there's maybe some opposition there. We'll see what, if the city, the mayor, and the aldermen all come together and make this happen. It's this was a big event for NASCAR. This is a big event for just sports in general. People not watching, my friends that aren't into NASCAR at all. The same people that all the comments that I got, when it's like, you interviewed Frankie Muniz? Oh, I remember watching him on TV. Those people said the same things about me about Chicago. So yeah, it's definitely reaching those fans that are out there. I've obviously visited Chicago many times, driven on Lakeshore Drive a lot, been in Grant Park. So yeah, it's for being from this part of the country, it is a good city and on all that stuff. It's fun, and hopefully, and I think it's going to come back. Or if it doesn't come back there, it will pop up in a city near you.
Yeah, well, I'll echo everything both of you said. A great weekend overall for the sport. And congratulations again to Shane van Gisbergen, and congratulations to NBC as well. I just saw the numbers come out. I think the most watched race on their family network since the 2017 Brickyard 400,
wow.
If I recall correctly. So a fantastic result there. And I'll just say one more thing before we move on. Congratulations as well to Justin Marks, and thank you everybody at Trackhouse Racing for putting this together. I remember I tweeted as soon as the Project 91 deal was originally announced with Kimi Räikkönen. I went on Twitter and I said Justin Marks is a future Hall of Famer. What he's done with Trackhouse in such a short amount of time. If he keeps up winning at this rate with all these different drivers, there was another stat I saw this weekend that didn't even occur to me. He's won with 3 different drivers from 3 different countries, because you got Daniel Suarez from Mexico, you got Ross Chastain from the United States, you got Shane van Gisbergen from New Zealand. The Project 91 car winning in its only 3rd ever race for that team, everybody working on that car. He might be a future first ballot Hall of Famer if things keep going the way they're going. And he was 250 feet away from a championship last year at Phoenix with Ross Chastain as well. So what Trackhouse Racing has done so young into their history here, so early in their history, I think that deserves a shout out as well. Not just Shane van Gisbergen, obviously he was phenomenal, but the entire Trackhouse team. It's a shame for Justin for his race on Saturday in the colleague car that it came to an early end with the engine failure. Felt bad for him there, but what he's doing as an owner on the Cup side of things is nothing short of incredible. So kudos to everybody at Trackhouse Racing. They've got a phenomenal thing going, and I hope we see that car. I mean, I think Justin Marks has kind of put the foot on the brake here a little bit with wanting to bring this car out as much as possible. He says once you get above 3 races a year, it really starts to become a third thing that you got to focus on full time, and you don't want that taking away from the priorities, which are obviously the 1 in the 99 cars. But as much as we can realistically speaking see that car out on track, I'm all for it, and bring guys like Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen. I think the sky's the limit for what you could do with that Project 91 entry.
Yeah, I don't think you're getting Lewis anytime soon.
Or Max.
Yeah.
Well, hey, I'll say this much. Lewis, I still remember when Jeff Gordon retired at Homestead in 2015. Lewis was one of his many guests that weekend, and he's been on record ever since he did the seat swap with Tony Stewart. He'd love to try it one day. So yeah. I'm still going to hold out a little bit of hope. Maybe it's not with Trackhouse. Maybe it's, maybe he'll be teammates with Bubba Wallace in the 2311 car in that 67. But, a guy can dream, right? Shane van Gisbergen just won a NASCAR Cup race in his debut. Anything's possible, right?
I would like to say I couldn't help but think Sunday that Ganassi got a sweep of the day with Alex Palou, and then Ganassi's ghost with Trackhouse Racing. that was my thought throughout the night.
DEI's ghost as well.
Yeah.
That goes back. And by the way, also one more point on Justin Marks. He might actually, if he wants to, I think he could, he might run NASCAR one day. I mean, that man is smart. He knows what to, how to market himself and branding and all that stuff. It's out there. I mean, I could see him running the sport one day. Was what I actually meant to say. I could see that. I really could.
I mean, the way things have gone for him at Trackhouse, I wouldn't put it past him. He certainly knows what he's doing over there. So we'll see what the future holds for Justin Marks and Trackhouse Racing, and specifically Project 91. I got to think the future's pretty bright after this weekend.
Yep.
Well, let's take a look now at the grid ranking, and we'll give you the recap since we still had the Cup race to go on the wrap-up show yesterday. Looking at the grid ranking top 10, you'll see Shane van Gisbergen in there for what he's done over in Supercars. Just to clarify, a bit of an unprecedented situation here. Joe put him in for the grid ranking in NASCAR. I think Joe mentioned he's something like 21st now. Of course, this is a one-off event, so it doesn't affect where he ranks in the overall grid ranking. Of course, his primary series is Supercars, but just an interesting note there. His score overall will remain the same, and no overall changes in the top 10. When you take a look at the full grid ranking, however, Carlos Sainz has entered. He's taken over there. You see him in the 35th spot. He replaces George Russell over on the F1 grid rating. Marcus Ericsson's fallen down out of it, and Alex Palou is now in second place, or he was in second place, I believe, now in the 20-point range, I should say, right up there with Max Verstappen. Of course, we were talking yesterday on the wrap-up show, could Palou, at the rate he's going, potentially challenge Max Verstappen? We'll just have to wait and see. You can follow the grid ranking for updates on that and the entire grid ranking at gridranking.com, and of course, at grid ranking on Twitter. All right, let's move on to the other race that took place in Chicago this weekend, the Xfinity Series. This one, I think, maybe not quite as positive of a reaction, and certainly some controversy that we have to talk about. Cole Custer ended up leading every lap of the race. That ended up being shortened just before the halfway point because the city of Chicago required the grandstand facilities to be evacuated due to lightning in the area. That prevented NASCAR from restarting the race on Saturday. A restart was briefly considered on Sunday. Drivers were called to their cars, but the record rainfall, as we talked about earlier, led to NASCAR making what's a virtually unprecedented decision, as far as I'm aware, declaring the race official and awarding full points before it reached the halfway distance. Granted, it was only a couple of laps, though. So, Brandon, I'll pose the question to you. Are you okay with how NASCAR called the end of this race here?
Oh.
It looks like we may have lost.
Yeah, I'm kind of indifferent on it as far as the Xfinity Series being called. Oh. Am I here?
Oh.
Am I here?
It looks like we.
There's Brandon.
You got you here now. It might have lagged a little bit. Did you get the question?
All right. Yeah, I was moving Windows too fast. And my PC didn't like it, so I lost some connection there. Am I there? Am I here?
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay.
I was just
okay.
So the question is, are you okay with how NASCAR called the end of the race? Go ahead.
Yeah, I was trying to say I'm pretty indifferent about it. The Xfinity Series, it was pretty obvious that God did not want the race to continue, so the rain just kept coming. So I mean, I don't know what else they were supposed to do. And also with the stipulations you already have with the city of Chicago, you can't be out for so long. They only want you to be in this time frame. And so although we got some F1 memes out of Cole Custer, I think it's fair to say that we couldn't get the race in. It wasn't going to be continued. They tried to into Sunday morning, and it didn't work. So we'll go at it next year and see if we can get a full race.
Okay, so the biggest thing, honestly, I don't have a problem with this. And when I know it's like against the rules, and I was listening to the teardown today, and Jeff Gluck and Jordan Bianchi were talking about this, and it's like go out there and ride around for 2 laps or something and make it official and halfway or something like that. And they asked the question, do you see NASCAR continuing this in the future? It's just like, oh, this is like, this is going to be a normal thing. No, it's not. I don't think it is going to be a normal thing. Yeah. But here's the other thing, though. You're at an event that's not even yours. I mean, you're not in control like you are at other facilities. Like, it's not like you're at Daytona or Talladega or Michigan or anything like that. You're in the city streets of Chicago. So the city, and obviously there was some control that NASCAR did have. And, when it rained, they got to evacuate everybody out. I mean, what do you want NASCAR to run in lightning? I mean, that's standard practice. Like if there's a lightning, it's a 30-minute delay. That's with anything. But I don't have a problem with this. I mean, you can make it up as you can make it up as you go. But then again, special circumstances and special races have their own rules. And this is one of them. If you can't finish the race, you can't finish the race. Remember, the Cup Series takes priority over anything. Then it's the Xfinity Series. Then it's trucks. Then it's ARCA. Obviously, we've had a couple of these incidents happen last year with ARCA, with rain stipulations. If you remember Talladega, last year they had to cut into, with the Xfinity race that was on network at the time last year. And then, of course, the famous one at Springfield with the rain and the concert coming up and all that. So this isn't new, but, it had to be done. And, I just also want to say this too. I just feel sorry for all those people that, it wasn't the race. That wasn't the only thing that was canceled. All those concerts that were canceled. I mean, I think that people were talking about that. This guy came up to, I think it was Jeff Gluck and Jordan Bianchi were talking about this on the teardown. It was like they came up to him and said, "Hey, is the Chainsmokers concert still happening?" And they go, "No, it's not." And it's like, that's the only thing I bought it for. It's kind of like they were going to have this big music festival along with the race in between, and as a way to, it's like, hey, we're NASCAR. We'd like you to watch us, and we're going to
Indy 500 much.
Yeah, that's true too. I mean, the Indy 500 with the snake pit and all that. Yeah. Have you been in there?
I've seen it from afar. It's as far as as close as I need to get. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Yeah. I have not been in the snake pit yet either. So, that's another discussion.
Another story, yeah.
So, but yeah. Anyway, I just feel so bad for all those events that got canceled. And by the way, the Chainsmokers had to go because they were going to do that concert, and then they went to another one out in Las Vegas. So, so obviously tight schedules as well.
I have to say, I know that the whole weekend was unprecedented, first and foremost. I kept hearing first ever street race for NASCAR, and I couldn't help but think, well, the Pinty Series races on street circuits all the time. So what do you say to that? But I get what they're saying, obviously, of course, National Touring Series here in the United States. I get that. But, an obviously unprecedented weekend was the street course and the weather and everything. I don't think it's the worst crime against humanity in the world ever that we called a race 2 laps before the halfway break. The only thing I would say is I have to say in the moment, I'm a little bit concerned about the precedent that it has been set that, if so-called extreme circumstances allow it, we can ignore all rules and make it up as we go. Then again, this is the same series that once put a 13th driver in a 12-driver chase because of extreme circumstances at Richmond in 2013. So I suppose that went out the window 10 years ago. But following up here on this particular point, it says right in the rule book, a race has to get to halfway. I don't know. Maybe there's a part of me that says, yeah, maybe you should have sent them out there. I don't care if the pace car has to go 5 miles an hour. You get those cars across the line, you run those 2 laps, so that there's no controversy whatsoever, and we have an official race by the rule book. Or you could have just, said, we don't know what the weather's going to look like tomorrow. Maybe we try to get those 2 laps in yesterday before we part the cars. I don't know. I understand that, that's probably a pointless deal in the grand scheme of things, but there is a part of me that, being the person that I am and wanting to see the rules followed according to the book, we didn't get to halfway, and yet we call this an official race and award full points. It's just something about that just isn't ever going to sit right with me, I don't think. But again, I understand it's extreme circumstances. I understand there was probably no good alternative. Maybe they could have come back and run the race today and negotiated with the city leaders to keep the street circuit set up for one more day. Maybe they couldn't. There was some debate as to whether or not Monday was an option. Would it have been an option for the Cup race? Maybe it wasn't for the Xfinity race. So, I mean, I guess to sum it all up, I get it. But at the same time, it kind of sets this precedent that NASCAR can just declare it extreme circumstances, and then we really do have a whose line is it anyway series on our hands where everything's made up and the points don't matter. But I digress.
Okay. Ben, are you trying to say that you wanted them to pace around 2 more laps so they can retain the same position they had 2 laps earlier, so we can make it official in the rule books, so we don't set a precedent that we can do this again?
Is that not what? I think it was spot 21, but the point still stands. Is that not what?
Yeah.
I mean, if F1 can do it, why can't we do it? You know.
Don't go down that hole. Don't go down that rabbit hole.
No, Joe, no.
And good to see our.
By the way, we like consistency here at Grid.
We do. We do.
Especially on the Encore.
Yeah, and thank you, Matthew Owens, as well. I got to give him a shout out here behind the mic for bringing this up to me in our messages here.
That makes it possible to go against all rules in the rule book.
That's a dictatorship.
Yeah, well, and I think Pacres was actually the one that tweeted this out. There is actually a clause in the rule book, which I was unaware of until this weekend, that basically says, look, in the case of, I don't know if extreme circumstances is verbatim what the clause says, but it basically says, look, if we get an unprecedented situation here, we will allow at race control's discretion for the rules to essentially be ignored and the best possible scenario in their minds to take place here. And I think that's what we saw on Saturday, or I guess just yesterday here was when the race was actually called. Yeah. But again, there's a part of me that's like, it says in the rule books you got to get to halfway. There were crew chiefs that were strategizing all night for when the race was going to restart, because they're thinking it's absolutely going to restart at some point because we haven't gotten to halfway. We got to come back and we got to finish this race. So, maybe in hindsight, maybe if they were just going to do this anyway, maybe you make that decision Saturday night so the teams can go home and don't have to prepare for sitting around and waiting for a decision. I don't know. I think that there's certainly some things that can be ironed out for next year. Hopefully we don't get this weather situation. Brandon, like you were mentioning, it's just NASCAR's luck. I mean, we could have a race in the middle of the desert, and we'd find a way to get rain in a place where it hasn't rained in years or something.
It's just not a fair showing for the street course yet. I think it wasn't fair to NASCAR to show really what they've got. And behind the mic, that sounds a lot. The last comment, that sounds a lot like elementary school playground rules, like playing Foursquare or something. And somebody goes, they get a new rule. No, there's a new rule. You can't do that.
No, pretty much. Just going to follow up on, or sorry, go ahead, Casey.
Okay, I was just going to say this, but when you have, and now I forgot what I was going to say. Yeah. Also, the teams, and a lot of the Xfinity teams, I think I don't know what outlet it was. I think it was Front Stretch, but I know someone talked to Tommy Joe Martins, and they've said that, a lot of the teams lost money that day, by staying that extra night.
Sure. Yeah.
So, I know it's also a cost saving measure. A lot of the Xfinity teams don't have, as a lot of money as, the Cup teams do. So, have doing that, which is why a lot of people, it's like, why is ARCA going 3 days to having 2 races in one weekend? Well, that's another discussion for another day. But
I did like Tommy Joe's tweet where he quoted, I forget if it was NBC Sports or NASCAR and NBC, but I think they tweeted out the Cup race purse, which was in, the $6-7 million range or whatever. And he said, now do the Xfinity purse, just to try to give fans an idea of how little we're making compared to the Cup teams and how much staying an extra day hurts us in comparison. I mean, Tommy Joe certainly more than anybody was what Alpha Prime Racing just went through trying to get to Portland a few weeks ago. So, it's an unfortunate situation how it all played out. I do think, ultimately the best decision was made. Again, I won't say the right decision 100% because, again, the rule has always been you got to get to halfway. We didn't do that, but I know it was only a couple of laps, and these were rare instances. As I guess that's the
rare instances.
All right, there we go. Accepting rare instances. Circumstances works too, in my mind. A couple more comments from Joe, just circling back here, and then we'll move on. Assuming NASCAR returns to Chicago next year, if SVG is not available, I'd like to see Eduardo Mortara from Formula E in the car. Plenty of the street course experience. Yeah, certainly. If you want to talk about drivers that have street course experience, you're certainly in the right place, looking at a Formula E driver. So who knows what the future holds for Project 91. And then Joe as well, throwing it back to Gran Turismo there. I guess they have a street course in Seattle on one of their games. So again, there's a lot of momentum.
Too. Go ahead,
Brandon.
Gran Turismo is getting a movie too. I just saw that.
It is, yes.
Today or yesterday. Yeah.
My curiosity is piqued for that. I'm curious to see how that's going to turn out. I think it's based on a real life story, if I'm not mistaken, and I'm not super familiar with it. So certainly,
this actually happened.
It certainly got my interest peaked there. I'm going to see if I can go out and try to see that whenever it comes out. I think it comes out sometime next month in August. So keep an eye out for that.
Should be fun.
All right, well, let's move on here real quick. Again, Josh Burch is off tonight, so I will run through these here just real quick. We had F3 and F2 going on this weekend as well in Austria, and it was Paul Aaron who took his maiden win in the F3 sprint event in wet weather conditions, a stunning drive from the 8th place starting spot. And we'll take you through the rest of the sprint results here. Again, if you want a closer look, you can pause the video real quick. In the feature race, it was Zach O'Sullivan taking the win ahead of Gabriel Bortoletto and Kyle Collett there. He came out on top of a fierce battle, really, between the entire top 5 there for that race win. A couple of quick notes here. The Brazilian flag, I think, got copied on the race results somehow when we went to build the graphics for tonight's show. Also, Sophia Flores, you see her down there in 9th place. She had a fantastic run, the first points of the year, but she looked to have scored. Unfortunately for her, she was disqualified from the official results. So move everybody else up one place and move her to last, I suppose, with her disqualification. So an unfortunate deal there for her, but a great weekend on the track nonetheless. Maybe they can still take that and use that momentum to move forward for her season. Now over to Formula 2, and we'll start with the sprint race. Big news for us here in America. The young American Jack Crawford took his first Formula 2 win. It's his 4th podium in sprint races this year. So he's building on his Formula 2 career. Who knows what the future holds for him, but certainly taking a step forward in his career this weekend with his first F2 victory. And then the feature race, Richard Verschoor took the win, a stunning drive himself from 11th on the grid on an alternate strategy ahead of Ayumu Iwasa and Frederick Vesti, who finished in 3rd, rounding off the podium, and he continues to hold the lead in the championship standings. Now we're going to move on to Indy NXT, and we'll bring Casey back here to recap this weekend. And I guess it was just kind of the theme of the weekend here because we had wet weather all over the place, and Mid-Ohio was no exception. Certainly had a threat of rain in the IndyCar Series race as well, but the weather didn't seem to bother Louis Foster. He took his maiden win in Indy NXT. Casey, what can you tell us about how Foster pulled off the victory, and who are some other drivers you want to shout out here for some good runs?
Oh, first off, did you see that move that Louis Foster went to get by Christian Rasmussen? That was amazing. I just watched the race, just before we came on here. But yeah, what a move by Louis Foster to just to get by. That's Andretti Autosport's first win in Indy NXT this season. So what a tight, and now that championship battle is getting really tight now. If you watch the race, Nolan Siegel did get off track, finished 15th. Not the best day for him. The points battle in that championship is only 12 between Nolan Siegel and Christian Rasmussen, 2 HMD teammates. So obviously you got Louis Foster up there as well. Of course, he's going to be definitely challenging for, that championship as well. And just really outside of that. And also a good run for Kiffin Simpson as well in 2nd. Hunter McElroy running in 4th, and then Reese Gold in 5th. Good run for Jacob Abel in 6th as well. So yeah, lots of impressive stuff at Indy NXT. Next race for them, they will not be in Toronto. After that, they will be with IndyCar the rest of the season, beginning at Iowa on July 22nd.
Okay, so I know the Women in Motorsports show has been kind of on hold the last couple of weeks. I do want to talk briefly about Jamie Chadwick here. It's her first top 10 of the year. I know she was fighting for a couple of positions ahead of that. She said on her Instagram she kind of got shuffled back down there to 10th, but still her first top 10. What stood out to you from her race this weekend? Do you think that she can use this as positive momentum to try to climb up in the standings here in the second half of the year?
Yeah, she was in quite some battles in today's race, and with her, it's just constantly improving every single race, and I think she's been doing that. And I think give it a few years, and she'll be in the top level of IndyCar before you know it.
All right, well, let's move on to some of the other series on the road to Indy ladder. I guess, Casey, do you want the USF 2000 first or USF Pro 2000?
Sure, let's do USF 2000 first.
Sounds
and how
good.
about a first career win for Evagoras Papasavas? And yes, that's how you say his name. That's what you get from listening to Rob Howden all these years. Though, of course, the voice of the USF Pro Championships. By the way, USF Juniors will be in action this weekend at Mid-Ohio, along with the ARCA Menards Series and the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series. So we'll provide some coverage over there, highlight those series as well. But race 1, Evagoras Papasavas getting his first win. Simon Sykes takes back the points lead from Loki Hughes. Finishes 2nd. Matt Clark, the Canadian, the last year's USF Junior, the inaugural USF Juniors champion, finishes 3rd. in that race. Loki Hughes finishes 4th on the day. Let's go to race 2. There were 3 races this weekend for USF 2000, and it was the Canadian Matt Clark getting it done this weekend. Evagoras Papasavas, the Ohioan, in 2nd, and another Ohio native. Well, his parents are from there, but Sam Corey gets P3 on the day. Of course, the North Carolina native, of course, getting the first win getting the place where he got his very first win in the USF championships ladder on the so-called road to Indy. Yeah, I know there's 2 different series, 2 different things, but it is still the overall road to Indy. So, of course, a good run for Nikita Johnson, Max Garcia to round out the top 5 in race 2. Let's go to race 3. A big win for Simon Sykes, redemption, getting that win. And Simon, of course, if you followed my channel, Simon I've known for a long time, since his Team USA days. But just an incredible town. Of course, if you remember Miles Rowe's story last year, it was just putting races together. And no, Simon doesn't come from a lot of funding, but overall, I know that Augie Pabst and Pabst Racing have been working hard to get him on the track, and they've done it. So a good run for him. Simon now leads the championship standings by Loki Hughes over Loki Hughes, 311 points on the day. So pretty big points lead for Simon Sykes. A good result. Next race for USF 2000 will be in Toronto coming up in 2 weeks' time. Let's go to USF Pro 2000, the next step on the ladder. And a much-needed win for the defending USF 2000 champion, Michael D'Orlando of Turn 3 Motorsports, getting his first win on the track. Jace Denmark, of course, who was in that championship. And how about Jack William Miller getting on the podium as well? A good race there. Miles Rowe finished 11th in this race. We'll get to him in a minute. On the day, Bjorge Garg on 5th. Liram Zindelli, of course, if you remember him from F2. He finished his 6th. Another impressive run for Christian Weir as well. Christian will be on the channel later on this week. He's our USF exclusive driver for the season. So he'll be exciting to talk with him about that. And another top 10 for Salvador de Alba. So good stuff there. All right, let's go to race number 2. And it was our good friend from Life on the Grid, Miles Rowe, finishing first, taking the win in race 2 at Mid-Ohio. Kiko Porto rebounded after a tough race 1 at Mid-Ohio. And Michael D'Orlando, a very solid weekend. I know he has not had the best start to the season for Turn 3 Motorsports, but a big solid weekend put together by D'Orlando, a veteran of this series for a long, long time. So good stuff there from USF Pro 2000. And Miles Rowe has a huge championship lead over Kiko Porto and Joel Grandforce of Exclusive Autosport. Next race for USF Pro 2000 will be at Toronto coming up in 2 weeks' time.
All right, Casey, thank you. Let's move on now to the ARCA Menards Series West. It was Trevor Huddleston picking up the win. But before that, maybe you wouldn't know it looking at the results with how far down each of them were, but we had a thrilling battle for the lead with Landon Lewis and Sean Higurani, but lasted, I think, upwards of 30 laps. Just those two side by side, Higurani trying to get around for the lead. How impressive was that battle, seeing those two side by side for that long?
Basically the top 2 for the championship in the ARCA Menards Series West. So, look, I've gotten a chance to know both of these drivers throughout my time covering this series. And, obviously 2 drivers that have really, really performed really well, especially on the west side of things. Landon Lewis, just putting races together, going for the championship. And, I've followed Landon's career through the Team Hornaday, my friends at Team Hornaday Driver Development. So, yeah, it's just good to see him blossom in his racing career as well. And he is actually kind of breaking some news here on Grid Encore Show, but he will be making his Truck Series debut this weekend for Roper Racing. He will be in the 04 truck this weekend for that team. So excited about that. And might be talking with Landon this week and also at the track this weekend as well. So that will be exciting there. But tough break for Sean Higurani in this race. Of course, cut down a tire midway through, so finished 12th. So still going to be a pretty good battle for this championship coming up. But let's talk about the winner, Trevor Huddleston, at his home track. The track promoter is his dad, Tim Huddleston. Been trying to win at this track for many, many years. So good family moment there to be a part of. But Huddle House gets it done at Irwindale. So next race for the ARCA Menards Series West will be at Shasta Speedway on July 29th. So that will be fun there. Of course, you can catch it on Flow Racing with my good buddy Charlie Crawl on the call. So, yeah, you'll get the main series for the next few weeks. Of course, ARCA will be at Mid-Ohio. They will also be at Iowa, and then following Iowa Speedway, and then they'll be on the Tricky Triangle at Pocono. So we're still in this big run of we've had an ARCA race every week since going all the way back to April at Talladega and Kern. So the ARCA Menards Series platform is ready to go. They're going to be racing every week this summer until the East Championship is settled at Bristol. So should be fun there. So lots of things to come if you're an ARCA fan. So it's going to be fun here. We got and another jam-packed weekend of racing, and I'll go over that toward the end of the show.
Well, Casey kind of took the second question there about Trevor Huddleston, of course, who ended up winning this race. He won here with Sunrise Ford several years ago. I think it was a 4-year, almost winless drought that he was on. I think he got another win at Evergreen, if I recall correctly, in 2019 in that Sunrise Ford car. But do you think, obviously we don't really talk about home and away in racing like we do in stick and ball sports. Do you think sometimes, coming to your home track where obviously you've got the family connection as well with his dad being a track promoter, do you think that provides some sort of advantage for Trevor Huddleston every time he comes back to Irwindale here? I
think it does, but it also has that added pressure of, you're racing in front of your home. Now you got to go win it. So it just depends on how you handle that. It's like, it is kind of like stick and ball sports. It's like, you're playing in front of your home crowd and, you got to perform. And that's with any form of competition. You just, you got to perform in front of the home crowd, your friends, your family. And it was good to see Trevor Huddleston win that race. So it'll be exciting. It'll be a few weeks before we see ARCA West again. Of course, as I mentioned, they'll be at Shasta Speedway coming up toward the end of the month.
We look forward to that. And of course, looking forward to your coverage upcoming this weekend in Mid-Ohio. And now we'll bring Brandon back on screen as we close out the show with our one shining moments. And Brandon, I'll go to you first. We got the Cup Series to pick from again here on the Encore show this week. What's your one shining moment from whether it be Chicago or INDY NXT Formula 2 F3? What do you have for us for your one shining moment?
Well, after I avoided all the obvious stuff, I had to go with Team Penske and Austin Cindric. This was a P6 turnout for him at the streets of Chicago. And really, if you look at so far his tenure with Team Penske at the Cup level, hasn't really been around much besides his 2022 Daytona 500 victory, as far as I've seen. So this was, I know they've been hurting as the third, kind of basically the third team of Team Penske after Logano and Blaney. Some might say Blaney and Cindric are kind of a toss-up with each other, but Blaney's been having some more recent success. So I got to give my one shining moment to Austin Cindric. I think this is going to be a huge confidence booster to him, and I really like who your one shining moment is too, Ben.
Why don't we go to Ben next?
Not a problem. I will tell you, I think the obvious one shining moment is Shane van Gisbergen, but I'm going to take the guy that nearly stole the win from him. How about Justin Haley? If you had told me that we would have Shane van Gisbergen fighting for the win with a Colleague racing car, I certainly would have believed you. I would have thought for sure you were talking about AJ Allmendinger. I was very surprised that he was as far down the grid as he was, and fell back a little bit from where he qualified as well. I thought particularly with the rain, I think he was one of the only drivers in the field that has any sort of experience racing on street courses back from his Champ Car days. So a little bit surprised that he wasn't the one up there, but at the same time, all credit in the world to Justin Haley. I know it's been a difficult year for Colleague on the Cup side of things, and for him to come out here and go head-to-head for the win with Shane van Gisbergen on old tires there, and for SVG to get around him and then Haley to get him back very briefly, I think was a very impressive move. Even though he did come up just short and came home with a second-place finish, he has nothing to be ashamed of. If you're going to lose to anybody on a street circuit, I think SVG, a multiple-time Supercars champion, isn't a bad one to lose to. So he won the race among the Cup regulars. I mean, we can say that much about him this weekend. I think absolutely worthy of a one shining moment this weekend for Justin Haley and Colleague. Yeah.
Okay, so my one shining moment is not from NASCAR, not from IndyCar. It is from F2. I'm giving it to Jack Crawford. Anytime an American can win, I remember covering Jack early on in his career when he was a part of the Road to Indy ladder at the time. You always knew when they went to Formula 3, followed his career out there, and it's just he's turning into obviously a household name, and yeah, it should be fun to see what he can do the rest of the season in F2.
And Matthew Owens echoing my one shining moment here. Justin Haley was the man of the match, if you will. What a drive after a crash on Saturday and apparently only 90 minutes of sim time on the track. So just think of the dichotomy there. You have Justin Haley with 90 minutes of sim time going up against Shane van Gisbergen, a multiple-time champion in supercars, which most of their schedule is comprised of these street course races. So the fact that he was able to hang as long as he was and put up a legitimate fight for the win, I think is very, very impressive and could be a breakthrough moment for him that kind of sets the tone for the rest of the season over at Kaulig Racing. So we'll just have to wait and see. And of course, Casey, I'll echo your one shining moment as well. Great to see the young American Jack Crawford having some success in Formula 2. We'll see if maybe there's a path to Formula 1 for him. I think you were mentioning a little bit backstage before the show. You think he might end up back here on the Road to Indy ladder, but we'll see what his future holds. I know a lot of people hold him in very high regard. Maybe I believe Kobe was even saying a couple of years ago he was maybe on track to be the next American F1 hopeful. Of course, Logan Sargent has gotten there. And a little bit of a shout out to him as well. I know it's just a technicality, but he did move out of the proverbial basement in the Formula 1 championship this weekend. His 13th place finish is good enough on a tiebreaker for 19th in the standings right now. Still tied with Nick DeVries on 0 points, of course, but DeVries' second best finish is 14th. They each have a 12th place finish, and then Sargent gets the second tiebreaker on that. So a bit of a technicality there, but Sargent no longer 20th out of the 20 driver championship, if you will. So hopefully they can turn things around at Williams and find a way to get him some points by the time we get to the end of the season. But getting back to Jack Crawford, certainly want to echo your one shining moment as well, Casey, because that was great to see this weekend.
Yeah.
And that is going to do it for us on another episode of Grid Live Encore. So thank you all so much for watching. Follow us on all of our social media platforms if you haven't already. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitch, LinkedIn, and of course, most importantly, right here on YouTube. Join us on our journey to 1,000 subscribers and beyond. If you really like what you saw tonight, you can take 5 minutes after the show to invest in our Patreon. Join Colin Deschelle, Mark, Robin, and David in investing in Grid Network, helping keep us on the air throughout 2023 and beyond. And as you can see, our goal of $500 per month will allow us to begin attending races on site on a more regular basis, and that allows us to expand our coverage for you, the viewers. If you'd rather make a one-time donation instead, you can visit Buy Me a Coffee. There's a link to that in the description box below as well. You can buy a coffee for your favorite on-air talent. Any amount will help us continue to grow our motorsports media outlet. Now on Wednesday, don't miss Grid Tonight with Josh Kobe. I believe Jonathan Field is filling in for Matt White this week, so stay tuned for that. We'll see, hopefully, Women in Motorsports program will be back on Friday in some capacity as well. And, of course, you can stay tuned for more Grid Live coverage this upcoming weekend as always. Any final thoughts, Brandon, before we sign off? And any silly season updates from you, Casey? We'll go to Brandon first.
Oh, we're going back to Hot Atlanta, and we saw the Ambetter 400 from the spring. So now time for that Quaker State green to be around the track. And I've been thinking about that today. I really hope we get some more aging in this track and fast. I know that's not going to provide any less grip probably, but I really am still kind of reeling about the repave and the banking we've got on it now. But I know that's not my place. We've got what we've got. We're going to have it for a long time, so might as well get used to it. So Hot Atlanta, Mid-Ohio, Xfinity. Of course, Casey will be there. So Grid Network presence at Mid-Ohio, going to be a lot of fun for next week.
Xfinity's in Atlanta. The trucks are with me this weekend. So
reverse it, spin around.
Well, remember, Xfinity was in Mid-Ohio for quite a bit of time.
Right. Yeah, my brain is not working at the end
it's all right. It's been a long week for all of us. So, yeah, but some interesting names. Will Rogers will be in the 02. He'll return to the Truck Series this weekend, driving for Young's Motorsports. Actually, also Matt Mills will be in the 20 truck this weekend for Young's Motorsports as well. And Race Hell, how does it go?
Race Hell Orderly, praise Dale Quarterly.
Yep, he will be in the 46 truck this weekend for G2G Racing. So also Ryan Vargas will be back in the 30 truck for On Point Motorsports. And also shout out to Greg Van Alst as he'll make his Xfinity Series debut with Alpha Prime Racing at Atlanta coming up this weekend. And of course also F1 across the pond. They'll be at Silverstone. So that'll be fun. They'll be fun to watch as well. IndyCar is off this week, and I believe MotoGP is on its summer break, so we'll go from there.
I had to say about the British GP, as Joshua says, it is the biggest motorsports event of all time in the world ever coming this weekend, according to Brits.
Yeah.
There you go. I got to say, I did see a tweet from Alpha Prime Racing just before we came on the air. A driver named Van won in his NASCAR debut this weekend. Maybe another driver named Van with Greg Van Alst can get the win in his NASCAR Xfinity debut at Atlanta. You never know what's possible in the sport sometimes. Of course, Greg Van Alst got the win at Daytona in ARCA earlier this year. Atlanta now races a lot like Daytona. Who knows what we're going to see?
I do not envy drivers at Atlanta right now. It seems so much concentration. It hurts to watch.
You know, of course. Also, Josh Williams returns to the place where he parked his car on the front stretch. So
there you go. That'll be interesting. We'll see. I'm sure we're going to try to market that. I got to say, I always look back at that East race I went to at New Jersey Motorsports Park in 2018. It really was stacked when I think about it. You had Dale Quarterly in the field there. It's great to see Will Rogers back, like you're mentioning, Casey, who went on to win that race. And Ernie Francis Jr. was on the pole. Vargas was in the field that day as well. Anthony Alfredo, who's gone on to make it to Cup, and he's now continuing to make occasional appearances all throughout the top 3 series. So great to see some familiar names back in Mid-Ohio this weekend. We'll see what comes of that race.
Yeah, it's like 4 drivers from, remember the 2018 NASCAR Next Class? Will Rogers, Chase Purdy, Zane Smith, and Ryan Vargas. Well, they're all going to be there. So, yeah.
All right, plenty to look forward to. So make sure you stay tuned for all of that. In the meantime, for Brandon Crossland and Casey Campbell, I'm Ben Schneider. Thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful rest of your week.
Thank you for watching us right here on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe and check out some of our other videos, including Life on the Grid, where we interview folks from the motorsports industry. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.